Fiona Tonkin, principal coach of the Australian Ballet, welcome to our conversation about Romeo and Juliet. The weight of Romeo and Juliet is huge. Everyone has a history of the story in a way, whether it's through film, whether it's through a ballet, whether it's through the play. Romeo and Juliet still touches us, in the gut. Mm-hmm. How does Romeo and Juliet touch you?
I think for me, I fell in love with the story through studying it in school as a teenager, being able to study it really deeply, all of the speeches and the dialogue, and also actually viewing the Zeffirelli film. I thought Olivia Hussey was divine.
Amazing.
Amazing.
And Leonard Whiting.
Yeah, stunning. And the fact that such a deep story, and seeing it in the flesh, actually, the story in the flesh, and hearing the language, and seeing how they interpreted the roles. Mm. And so always Romeo and Juliet was something that was, it grew in me in my high school years. Mm-hmm. And so when I came to the Australian Ballet and witnessed our dancers of the time in the Australian Ballet perform the roles, that was the one thing that made me want to be a principal of this company, to be able to do that role and to instill in what I'd learnt and what I'd visioned and what I wanted to interpret myself to do the role.
Yeah, amazing. Mm. Going into you interpreting the role, you were given the chance, mm-hmm. which, some aren't, mm-hmm. and having danced Romeo, it's really such an amazing opportunity, mm-hmm. one that I think everyone is grateful for. Mm-hmm. How did you approach it at the beginning? Because I think a role like this, mm-hmm. a role like Juliet, a role like Romeo, mm-hmm. it develops and you find more nuances and you find how to boil things down even, yes. or to amp things up at certain moments. Mm. How did you first perform it?
I took a lot of time in my spare time to just listen to the music and imagine myself doing it. So, the rehearsals were for refining the choreography, to get used to the movement, and but for me the important thing was telling the story, and so I spent a lot of hours on my own just listening to the music with my eyes closed and just going through it over and over and over again.
And so the Cranko version, mm-hmm. there are many different versions, yes. of Romeo and Juliet. Mm-hmm. One famous one is Kenneth Macmillan's. Yes. Another famous version is Lavrovsky, mm-hmm. At Mariinsky Theater. Yes. Grigorovich has one at Bolshoi.
Mm-hmm.
There are many versions of
mm-hmm.
Romeo and Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what, for you, is so special about the John Cranko version, mm-hmm. and why it's so special to mm-hmm. the Australian Ballet.
Mm. First of all, I learnt the role through Anne Williams, and so she was she was Cranko's second in command, basically. So she brought the riches of what she had learnt from Cranko to the Australian Ballet. And so it was a real privilege. She was a scary lady to me, but because it was something about her intention, and her intention was always about the story and what movements meant, what everybody was doing on the stage. And so, and then the choreography itself, it's not overly intricate. It repeats, the steps repeat as the music repeats. And so there's a certain flow and simplicity to it. But what was really beautiful is it followed the pattern of the music so beautifully. It allowed the dancer to have a voice, and through that music, with the choreography, the dancer is given that opportunity to tell the story through it. And And I think that is what's so beautiful about Cranko's pas de deux. And I think we all, whatever version that anybody does, will always fall in love with it because of the music and the story. But particularly with Cranko, and I think it's, the choreography tells a story in itself, like Juliet's solo, how she comes out and she notices Romeo, and there's the tentativeness of it, and then all of a sudden she's full on joy about this burgeoning sort of fascination, to the point where they get lost in their own world. And it's all there in the choreography, it's all there in the music. And so the dancer is then given the opportunity to put their own interpretation of the role. And I think that's why I loved it so much.
Yeah. And did it develop through time? Or how, if it did, how did it develop through time? You know, through the many performances you did of it?
Yes.
How did it evolve for you?
I think I was really, really lucky to have my first Romeo be a seasoned principal. And that
makes a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah, it does.
Because it gave me the opportunity to react and to fully commit to acting.
And to feel taken care of.
And to feel, oh God, that was divine, you know, just being lifted and thrown around, it was wonderful. And then as the years went by, you know, so first of all I started with Paul de Masson, and then my next Romeo was Stephen Heathcote. And I think because we were similar ages, it was another nuance to it, which was wonderful. But I think the main thing about when you come back to a role each time, it does grow, and there are nuances. And so if there's a repeat of a phrase, that phrase develops, and there's a different meaning behind that phrase, and then you just fully, the more you come back to it, the more freedom there is to something, the more passion. And for me, it's like I had to hold it back.
You had to hold your passion back?
Well, I have to, because I would go full throttle, and it was just too much. So
what was too much? Did you feel, was it your characterization? Was it for your partners? Because sometimes, you know, when you have a wild partner that you're partnering, it can be hard to control. So what was it? What did you have to pare back?
I think I had to hold back my emotions a little bit, because I would just go there, and I can go there in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, it's that thing where you have to build. You know, you have to build it, and so that you take the audience with you on an adventure to a certain degree, and not go full throttle at it.
Yeah. I think that comes through time as well.
It does.
You know, knowing, having the assurance of when to pull it back.
Exactly.
And to know that that's enough.
Absolutely.
Because I think with youth, with the first time you dance a role, you're feeling like, oh, I have to give it 120% all the time.
Oh, exactly. And one thing I remember Anne Williams saying to me, she said, Fiona, you have two assets, you know, your smile and your arabesque, and they are too much.
Are they?
So it had to be, like, you know, tapered down and refined.
I love a pared back arabesque.
Yes.
That's really, really good advice, actually.
Yeah, exactly. But what you just said then about the dancers coming to this role and wanting to go is exactly what I'm finding in the rehearsal at the moment.
Yeah.
And they're so excited to do it, and you can tell that especially the females have already gone through the story in their head.
Of course.
And they come in there and they go guns blazing, and you have to pare it back.
Yeah.
You know, because it's important especially with this choreography, or any choreography, is that you want the choreography to be there, and you want it to be refined, and you want it to be the vehicle in which you can tell a story on top of. So you get that over and flowing, and then this can come over the top and can affect the flow of it. So it's a really interesting journey.
Yeah. So Okay, so you've danced Juliet, you've stepped off the stage, and now you're in the front of the studio. Now you are Anne Williams. You are your Anne Williams, teaching Juliet
Yes.
the role. How do you find the balance between self-interpretation and individuality of a Juliet, which is paramount, and actual choreographic honesty?
Yes.
How do you find that balance?
Actually, I have learnt to, and even when I first came back to coaching, I always said that I would not impose my interpretation of something on any role.
Smart.
Because it's really important that the dancer has their own voice.
Yeah.
That's really, really important to me. And so it is the perfecting and the being true and authentic to the choreography, and then getting oneself to be authentic with the story.
Yeah, yeah. And if you find a dancer to come in with this preconceived idea of what it should be, how do you, what are your tactics? You have to admit your secrets now.
Yeah.
But what are your tactics of saying, I know you've seen the Zeffirelli version, I know you've seen the Baz Luhrmann version, I know you've read the play, but here's Cranko's version.
This is Cranko's version. And I think sometimes I take it back to the moment. It's the moment of time. It's sort of like if at the end of the balcony pas de deux, for instance, and this is very, very simple. At the end, he runs and he wants to take her away, and she says, "Stop! No, I need to go back." And then there's this hug. Okay, it seems very simple, and then you see the dancers go hug, and then they have to walk back. That hug is so important. It's like it's not just a hug. It encompasses the body and and then as you're walking, you're hugging and you're hanging on for because you don't know when you'll see each other again.
Yeah.
Like there are moments, and then in those moments, that's where you need to be true to what is being said at that moment.
Yeah, great, great. Did you have one performance of Juliet that is embedded in your memory?
I think the one that is embedded in my memory is when the Australian Ballet went on a bicentenary tour, and we went to Russia, and I danced on the Nerensky stage with Steve, and that was like all my dreams come true. It was, I don't know, because I never thought that I would ever have that sort of opportunity representing the Australian Ballet, doing a ballet that I wanted to do forever. Yeah.
And that was created at the theater you were dancing at.
Yes.
And the premiere was in 1940 at Mariinsky Theater. And truth be told, the dancers thought the music was undanceable because it was so hard. If you can sort of imagine it being, if it's a premiere, if it's the first kind of go at the score, you're like, what is this? But now it's considered, I think, the greatest score in ballet. Yes, there are other Russians, i.e. a man named Tchaikovsky, who has famous balletic scores, but Romeo encapsulates in the music the story.
And the emotion. That is the story and the emotion. That's what.
And the themes that come through.
So
with
beautifully.
The Juliet theme, the Romeo theme, the fighting, the tension in the strings. It's unbelievable. So for you, it was Mariinsky Theater, Romeo, where it was created. I've had similar memories with other ballets. I danced Sleeping Beauty at Mariinsky Theater, and I was like, this is where this ballet was created. It's really crazy to think about, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Yeah. Did you dance on a wood floor in Russia?
We didn't, because it was the Australian Ballet, And of course, the
You brought
floor.
you brought your floor, okay.
Yes.
So there were no watering cans?
There were no watering
No,
cans,
okay.
no. But it was doing the Juliet solo up, you know, that difficult manège with
Yeah.
the double rond.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to perfect
Going
that upper
uphill.
rake.
Yeah, because Mariinsky stage
Exactly.
is raked, which is
Yeah.
typical in older
Yeah.
theatres.
Yeah.
And the tradition of the watering can's pretty amazing.
I remember
you know,
that though.
because
Yes.
there are the wood floors, and they
Yes.
have to make the wood floors
Yes.
sticky. So
Yes.
you know the newest company member goes around with a watering can,
Love it.
watering
I love it.
watering the floor.
Yeah.
Well, audiences come to Romeo and Juliet time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
The music,
Mm-hmm.
the ballet,
Mm-hmm.
the story,
Mm-hmm.
the dances.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And I think not just Romeo, to be honest. I ask myself a lot, you know, why do audiences continue to come back to Romeo and Juliet, Swan Lake, the Nutcracker? And I think it's exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
It's the music, the dancers, the story, and that's the enduring, you know, love and passion and power of this art form.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Fiona, it's great to talk to you. What I see, how Juliet conjures up something in you, is exactly the power that I think Romeo and Juliet has. It's great to see that passion and that love, because it really is so meaningful.
Thank you.
Thank you.